so the language concerns. So reading. I have one child. My husband and I were both very early readers. I was reading before I was 3 years old. Not well, but I was reading. My husband was reading before he was 4. So we had this one kid, and we read to him every single night in his life. I sat him on my lap, I put the book in front of him, and I run my finger under the words. By the time he was 5, he could take one of those books and read it to me, so I thought. We go to grade 1, and we go to our first parent-teacher conference. Guess what, Mr. and Mrs. James? Your son cannot read. Cannot read. Now, I will tell you this. At that point, my son is now 32 years old. In those days, they were teaching how to read by something called the whole language method. Not a good way to teach boys to read. Probably not a good way to teach anybody to read. It's a great way to appreciate reading, but not to teach reading skills. We actually then had to hire someone to teach him phonics and structured reading approach. And by the time he was in grade 3, he was reading at grade level. Now, he was in a private school. Everybody else was reading at 6th grade level. By 6th grade, he was reading as well as they were. He just wasn't a very fluent reader. And in 6th grade, he went off to a boys' school, was there for 6 weeks, came home at his first break, and he was reading like a girl. In other words, I couldn't get the book out of his hands. He bought a house because it has built-in bookcases. What happened? His brain got old enough? I don't know. He's a boy. They don't acquire reading skills really rapidly. That doesn't mean he was dyslexic. I mean, by the strict definition of the term, he was dyslexic, but he didn't have any specific thing. He just couldn't. He loved it. He read too. What we did discover was if you read something to him 3 times, he owns it all, which is why he could pick up a book and appear to be reading the book, turning the pages, finger in the right place at the same time. Don't go to the movies with him if he's ever seen the movie before. He will tell you, oh, this is what comes next. And he knows, you know, for about 20 minutes, he can tell you what everybody says. Now, so we have developmental laterality. Here's a problem. Boys simply do not develop the verbal skills. Most boys. Now, when I say boys and girls, please know I'm talking in general. I'm not talking about a child. I have the brain of a 14-year-old boy with better verbal skills. So I don't fit all the girl things with this. Although I do read pretty well. So you get the developmental laterality. Then you have a problem of developing phonemic awareness. This is something I think most of you all are fairly familiar with, the idea of understanding the sounds of your language. Now, the problem with that is boys, little boys, baby boys, tend to have ear infections more often than baby girls. We're not sure why that's true, but it stops up their ears. We know that mothers do not talk to baby boys as often as they talk to baby girls. We don't know why that's true. I think I know, but there's no research on it. So we have this problem, and we have moms who have these lovely voices, lovely inside voice talk to a child. So you have a boy who doesn't hear soft sounds or high sounds, a mother who doesn't speak to him, who's using a light voice, and he's got an ear infection, and no wonder he doesn't develop phonemic awareness. And we have parents who are not reading to their kids on a regular basis. Every child needs to be read to every single day for at least 15 minutes. So we have this reading delay, and we call it dyslexia. As if, and here's the problem. So you say to a boy, I'm really sorry you have reading problems, you have dyslexia. To a boy, that means my brain is broken for reading. I will never be able to read. And that's not true at all, and you and I know that there are many boys who in grades 1, 2, 3 are very slow to acquire reading skills. But then they can take off. Another problem that they have is something called saccades. Now, saccades is not something people do a lot of research on, but I'm fascinated with it because I'm a psychologist. If you could know what you actually saw, you'd be horrified. Because what you actually see, clear and in color, at arm's length is 2 slightly overlapping coins, but like this. And you say, oh, but I see color. I said, I can prove to you you don't. It'll take me a few minutes to do it. And I'm not doing it with each of you, but just take my word for it. What you see in this part of your vision is in color, but it's fuzzy. And what you see out here is black and white. Well, then how come you don't see that? Well, because you have a good brain and a memory. Because your eyes are moving just slightly all the time, up and down, back and forth. That's saccades. That's why when you start to read a page, you know that the paragraph is coming to an end shortly, because your eyes have been there, but you didn't know it. You know there's a question mark coming up at the end of this sentence. Oh, so this is a question. Your eyes have been there, but you didn't know it. They're very quick, over and back, over and back. What we've discovered is that there is a form of dyslexia in which children have huge saccades. You can actually see them. Watch their eyes go like this. And these are the children who cannot keep track of the words on the page. So we give them one word at a time. We give them one line at a time. We make the print bigger. Because if we make the print smaller, then their eyes go over, and they can't. And when they come back, they're not on the same word anymore, or they're not on the same line. That's a saccades problem. And for some children, it's something that they may struggle with most of their life. But for some boys, it's minor, but it gets them into trouble at about grade 3 and 4. Because think about the size print of books for grades 1 and 2. Fairly big, right? But you get to grade 3 and the print gets smaller, because the theory is by that point their saccades should be under control. But you will have some boys whose saccades will not yet be under control. And they will not continue to make progress. Just put the stuff on a computer with a touch screen and make it a little bigger and see if that helps. I have no research on this, but I've been talking about this around the world, and a lot of teachers have used this with a few boys, and have said, you know, just making it bigger helps a lot, and they read fine. So try it. One never knows. All right, another problem is writing. We know, I mean, if you ask every kindergarten teacher in the world, how kind of fine motor control do the boys have? Oh, they have terrible fine motor control. Right, they can jump, they can throw balls, they can do gross motor just fine, but they don't have fine motor control. And yet we expect them to learn to write. Does that even make sense? You let them write bigger. Give them bigger lined paper, bigger print. Have them go up to the board and write on the board. Boys love to do this. It gets their big motor skills going, and they're very good at it. Now, there is a problem of dyspraxia. Dyspraxia is not real common. I am probably one of the few women in the world who suffers from dyspraxia very badly. My handwriting is not just awful, it is unreadable sometimes. I can tie my shoes, which is more than the young man who plays Harry Potter can do. He literally, I talked to his 8th grade teacher. She said he can't tie his shoes. It's amazing. But I have all the other problems that the dyspraxic has. I reverse digits, I do all kinds of stuff like that. But you have to understand that writing may well be the place where boys learn to read. In boys' schools around the world, what has been fascinating me is to watch little boys in grades 1 and 2, 3, writing this way. All of a sudden, they're producing words to read. And they can do that before they can actually read the words as well. I know it sounds sort of strange. But get them to write a story. Get them, even if they dictate the story to you and you write it down. But because the minute they get engaged in the whole notion of a story, when they read, it's better. Oh, one other reason we need to read to children is this, that the sound of the written word is not the same as the sound of the spoken word. We forget that. And lots of boys have trouble learning to read because what goes on in their head doesn't sound like what they're used to hearing if nobody's been reading to them. So that's another reason we need to do that. And then we have societal expectations. Books are written for girls, for the most part. My son in grade 3 had to read a book called The 100 Dresses. Now, he wasn't reading very well then, so I had to read it to him, and he says, Mom, I don't understand this. I don't blame you. It's a great book for girls. It's a wonderful book about bullying for girls. Not so much for boys. He would far rather have read Captain Underpants. But his teacher said, that's not appropriate for school. Why? It's fairly well written, actually. Diary of a Wimpy Kid. That's fairly well written. Well, the girls wouldn't be interested. Fine, let the girls read one book, let the boys read another. That's not the end of the world. What you want is for them to pick up a book. Reading is essential. Yes?
Oral culture.
Yes?
Men and boys are not well spoken.
Right.
In the case of having the boys dictate their stories because they can't write it, do we write in the language that they can?
I would write it in the language here's the deal. If it's a 7-year-old, his grammar isn't going to be great. But what I might do is, I would write it the way he told me to begin with, because I want him getting used to that business of writing. And then as he gets a little better with this, I might say, now, how about if you say the words this way, because that's better grammar, that makes better sense. In other words, I don't want to stop him from that flow of words to begin with. I don't have any problem. I would make sure that everything that I put down there was spelled correctly. There's the key, is I'm not going to spell it the way he would spell it. But, which will be interesting, because when he watches you write it, the word, he's going to see the word come out of his mouth, and then he's going to see it go up on the screen. Make the type big so it's easy for him to read it as you type it. And then he can see those words, what the sound, what it looks like on the screen. That may help him learn to read, because he's going to be interested in reading what he wrote.